Yep, bring Mr. Jones. Courtroom, you can bring me a jury when they're ready. Please be seated. In a moment, you may regroup.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, based upon your examination of Miss Jasmine Pace, were you able to ascertain the position that she was in at the time the injuries that you documented in your autopsy report were inflicted upon her body?
I believe that the injuries were most likely inflicted in the same position in which she was found, that is, in that fetal position.
When you say the position as found in the fetal position, sir, I am now showing you on the screen what's been admitted into evidence as Collective Exhibit 2045. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Objection, may we approach?
Yes.
Exactly. I'm sorry, sir. What was your response to that question?
I believe that it's most likely that they were all inflicted in that position.
And so we're clear when we're talking about the injury, sir, what we're talking about is in 204-15.
Yes, sir.
Is it also your testimony, sir, that on cross-examination that Ms. Pace was in that position that we saw in the preceding photograph, but not moving?
That's correct.
Staying put?
Yes.
Would you agree, sir, that placing a person into that fetal position makes it easier to inflict injuries?
Well, certainly that cluster of injuries is very easy to do in that position, or to inflict.
Counsel also asked you questions on cross-examination about having somebody in that fetal position make it easier to place in garbage bags. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I do.
Would you agree that it would make them easier?
Yes, certainly.
Would you agree that it would also then make it easier to place Jasmine Pace into the suitcase?
Yes, sir, it would.
Would you agree, sir, that overkill can also be a desire to kill?
It may be, but again, I prefer to leave that to the psychiatric side of the house.
Defense counsel asked you a question that elicited a very interesting response. You said that dead people don't tend to move. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I do.
Okay. Meaning that a person who is deceased doesn't tend to move around much. Is that correct?
Well, certainly they can be. Occasionally gravity will take over depending on how precarious their position is, but that's really gravity moving them, not obviously any volitional movement.
Doctor, I'm now going to show you what's been admitted into evidence as 204-3. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is one of the shackles that was around Jasmine Pace's ankle and elbow.
For the record, Judge, I'm retrieving Exhibit 206. Just 1 second, Doctor. I now pulled up 203-3. Do you see the shackles in that?
I do, yes, sir.
The shackle with the chain, where was that on Miss Pace's body?
That's around the right forearm near the elbow. You can actually see this shackle and the chain, and you can see the upper arm bone and the 2 forearm bones right here. The other side of that is this part down here, which you can see the lower leg bone and the foot bones down here.
And where would that have been in relation to the carpet that we see here?
Well, if we assume that Jasmine Pace is on the carpet, right side down, head toward Mr. Boyle, then we have, Your Honor, may I step down?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And if we place her head here in this area and her back going this way, then the shackle, this one being the one around the right upper arm, is going to be in this position right along here.
Set it there?
Sir? Yes, sir.
And Doctor, I'm now handing you the other half of the shackle. It appears to have how many links connected to it?
This has, well, one long one and a short one. So this would be, again, we were looking at it reversed for most of the time. So this is actually going to be in this area, I believe, based on the x-ray that we're seeing there.
Thank you, sir. Counsel asked you if you had an opportunity to go to the crime scene. I believe your response was no, you have not.
That's correct.
Doctor, I'm now showing you what's been admitted into evidence as 127-2.
Terry, can you turn his microphone around, please?
Yes, sir.
Sir, would you please familiarize yourself with 127-2?
Yes, sir, I recall seeing this photo.
So you've seen that photograph before?
Yes, sir.
You know where that photograph was taken?
I'm told that it was taken at Mr. Chen's apartment.
Do you see any objects in that photograph that you see in the courtroom here today?
It appears to be that rug or portion of carpet, rather, that is currently on the floor of the courtroom.
Thank you, sir. Doctor, do you see where the spray bottle is located? Over there on the bottom left-hand corner of this photograph.
Yes, sir, I do.
I'm now showing you 127-5. You see that photograph?
Yes, sir.
Now I'm going to return the shackles to your folder. I'm going to peel back, if you will, the carpet. Do you see the pad that's below the carpet?
Yes, sir.
Do you see the pad on the carpet in the photograph?
Yes.
Or is the staining pattern on the carpet in the pad consistent with what you see in the photograph?
It is.
Showing that it has been overlaid from being adjacent to the wall, laid over on itself.
Yes.
And you do see the stains all the way through to the subfloor.
Yes.
Is that a lot of blood that you see there?
That is a fair amount of blood. Yes, it is.
Would that quantity of blood constitute a large portion of the missing volume of blood from Miss Pace's body?
Yes.
Keeping in mind that stain, try to memorize it in your head. Now showing you what's been admitted into evidence as 127-13. Do you see the bed that has now been placed up against the wall furthest away in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that it's where that carpet had actually been folded over onto itself in the preceding photograph?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, sir. I can have a moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
You had an opportunity, Doctor, to look at the Blue Star photographs in this case.
Yes, I have.
Objection.
Basis, sir, you want to approach?
This was not a topic that I covered in my cross-examination.
Movement of the body absolutely was, Judge.
I never talked about the star with me.
Well, you certainly talked about blood. It's part of the Dr. Cogswell's testimony throughout about the large amount of blood that was apparently missing from the victim's body. Blue Star has to do with where the blood was. I'm assuming that's where the state's going. If not, then you can feel free to renew your objection.
Thank you.
At this point over.
If I could have it darkened a little more if possible. Not possible?
I got them all
It's
also.
okay. Thank you, sir. You see the Blue Star reaction?
Yes, sir.
I'd also like to draw your attention. You see the corner of the door frame right there in the
Is this
center?
it?
Yes, sir, right there. And do you see the evidence marker right next to it?
I do.
Number 6. I'm going to go back to that first photograph that I showed you, Doctor. Does that appear to be the same door frame?
Certainly, it's a door frame just like it.
Defense counsel asked you on cross-examination whether or not you knew if any items of carpet had been submitted to the TBI crime lab for testing. Recall that question?
Yes, sir, I do.
You see how the carpet in this particular case, sir, extends all the way past the door frame?
Yes, in this area?
Yes, sir, where it transitions from one room to another.
Yes.
Specifically, and I'll zoom in right on it. Trigger is located on the spray bottle.
Yes.
Based upon your cross-examination, would it be your understanding that no item samples of the carpet were taken in close proximity to that blood stain right there?
That would appear to be the case, yes, sir.
You would agree that's a 6?
Yes.
And what's been admitted into evidence is Exhibit 141. Do you mind reading the description?
Carpet sample with possible blood. The location is bathroom/bedroom transition southeast of shower.
Now I'm going to show you another photograph, Doctor. You see the evidence marker 6?
Yes,
You see the carpet?
I do.
Does that appear to be the same transition from one room to another with that door frame?
Yes, sir, it does. The evidence marker is also number 6.
Do you mind reading the orange tape at the bottom of 141, sir?
The evidence tape at the bottom, it has the numeral 6 with a circle around it and initials, who I assume is the recovering party or the packaging party.
Sure. Specifically, sir, this tape right here, what does that say in the small print?
Oh, TBI Crime Lab.
I'll show you another photograph, Doctor. See the number 9 right there?
I do.
Do you see the reddish substance adjacent to the right of the number 9?
In this area right here.
Yes, sir. Another photograph of it.
Yes, sir.
And has been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 142.
Which is, again, got TBI Crime Lab.
And the item number indicated?
The item number is number 9, and it's described as carpet sample with blood.
Now I'm going to show you another crime scene photo, Doctor. You see the number 6?
Again, yes, sir.
And you see the number 9.
I do.
Thank you, sir. The injuries inflicted on Miss Pace's body occurred at various stages, including ante-mortem,
Yes, sir.
paramortem,
Yes, sir.
but not postmortem.
I didn't see anything that I considered to be definitively post-mortem, so that is correct.
Sure. Now, Doctor, but in the paramortem category, the spectrum that you described to this jury,
Yes, sir.
some of them are closer to ante-mortem. Some of them are closer to postmortem.
That's correct.
And it took how long for Miss Jasmine Pace to succumb to her injuries?
Objection, ask and answer. It was not on over on direct hand cross.
I think based on cross-examination, on timing of how closely spaced the blows were, that they could ask this question again. If you want to recross to get a point in, certainly can, Mr. Weiss, overrule this one.
You would agree some of them are in the early portion,
Yes, sir.
some of them are in the later portion.
That's correct.
Which means that the injuries inflicted on her with a cutting instrument spanned anywhere from 0 seconds, 30 seconds, to 5 minutes.
It is certainly possible. It's also possible that it was significantly shorter for the infliction of injuries, not necessarily for death.
Sure. But what is absolutely certain is that some of the injuries were inflicted after massive trauma had already been inflicted on Jasmine Pace.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Now, Doctor, the toxicology report that counsel was asking you about referenced several categories in the one of the 3 batteries that I'd like to bring to your attention, and I'll pull it up here in just a second. Drawing now your attention to the second page of the toxicology report. What are cannabinoids? You can see right here.
That's basically marijuana. It's marijuana and its metabolites and any related substances.
So what you're saying is, doctor, the broad spectrum that covers THC was tested for?
It was, and again, that was by the ELISA method, not the method with the interfering substances.
The interfering substances of the test, the previous test, which was labeled...
That was the HPLC.
Yes, so the HPLC is designed to differentiate between the various cannabinoid metabolites. Is that correct?
Correct. Both the parent drug and each one of the metabolites. We have the delta 9 and the 11-hydroxy delta 9 and the delta 9 carboxy. Those on the left are metabolites of the delta 9, which is the active compound in marijuana.
Some of them are psychoactive, some of them aren't.
Correct.
But what that means is that would be useful for you determining how far it had been processed through the deceased person's body.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other test that was performed, the ELISA test, the next one down on the list, testing for cannabinoids, would just tell you generally there is a broad spectrum of substances that we're looking for that fall under the umbrella of cannabinoids.
Yes, sir.
Okay, including the preceding 11-hydroxyl delta 9 THC, delta 9 carboxyl THC, and delta 9 THC.
Yes, sir. Again, these are all a family of drugs. For example, opiates. And
Sure.
I believe we have a category for opiates. Opiates in general is going to include things like morphine, heroin, oxycodone, oxymorphone. All of these things that are opiates are going to fall under that large umbrella. But we have specific testing for oxycodone and oxymorphone because it's so commonly abused. They are opiates, but the opiate test is sort of a global test for everything that's there. And to use my clumsy pickup truck analogy, this is like saying white pickup trucks. Okay, so is it a Ford, is it a Chevy, is it a Toyota, is it, well, you just asked me to look for white pickup trucks. And since I didn't see any white pickup trucks, it doesn't matter whether there were Fords or Chevys or anything, because they're not there.
So to insinuate that we don't know whether there was cannabinoids in Jasmine Pace's blood would not be correct, would it?
If we're looking at the family of cannabinoids, That is correct. If we're looking specifically at THC, we don't know whether she did or did not have THC, but we know she didn't have the specific family of cannabinoids under that heading.
But if she had THC in her system, she would also show as having cannabinoids.
We should see it under ELISA, yes.
And that test was performed, it was not interfered with because it's a different process to produce the result.
Correct.
You didn't smell alcohol, and the testing doesn't show alcohol,
That is also correct.
just like it doesn't show cannabinoids.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Is that why you put on your report negative?
Yes.
Have a moment.
So if we're having trouble finding exhibit, we'll take time.
Laptop over.
Dr. Cotswell, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as exhibit number 192. Can you identify what you see on the screen there?
This looks like a sales receipt from a company called Elevated Hemp Company with what I'm assuming is some THC type product. I don't go to those stores, so I'm not really sure what I'm looking at.
You know, trying to use that kind of guy. What is the, it says customer name. What's the customer name right there?
The customer name is Jasmine Pace.
And you don't know if Jasmine Pace used any of these. We can see that she bought these products, but we don't know if she used these products. Right?
That's correct, we don't.
But hypothetically, let's assume that she did use these products. Is there a reason why that the use of these products wouldn't show in your toxicology report, or the toxicology report, not yours?
Well, if they either haven't been used frequently or recently, if she's metabolized off those, whatever those are, or if she hasn't yet taken any, if there's been enough time between her last dose, if you will. The other option that's there is that we don't, I'm assuming because this seems to be hemp related, that these are supposed to contain some degree of THC. We have nothing that tells us that they actually do, or they may in fact have something other than THC. They may have, for example, kratom or metragine. That also is sometimes sold. I think it's still illegal in Tennessee, I'm not sure. But that is on gun barrels, so.
And just to make sure, what is the date of that receipt?
That's the 22nd of November of 22.
A week before your autopsy?
Yes.
And you talk about a family of cannabinoids, right?
Yes.
And so there's delta THC9A, right? You're familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a long list of delta THC9, P, O, and all those different things.
There are many, yes, sir.
Would that toxicology report necessarily find evidence of that in her system?
The ones that it would test for, had it not been for their interfering substances, are listed there. They're the common ones with the carboxy delta and I'm blanking on the other metabolite. It would be the
Take your time.
the two that were under the 11-hydroxy and the delta-9 carboxy would be the common ones that are tested.
But there's
And
other
all of those more esoteric ones, if you will, wouldn't be in that panel.
So there's other, I like your word, esoteric, other types of esoteric THC that toxicology report wouldn't be looking for.
The one that was not tested shows you what the test would have tested for.
And then not only are there different types of THC delta 9, there's THC delta 8,
Yes,
and there's THC delta 10.
yes.
Would this toxicology report test for those substances?
Not that specific report, because again, it shows you the 3 substances it tests for, but as Mr. Boyle pointed out, we have the ELISA test that tests for the general family of cannabinoids. And I do have access to the laundry list of everything that would come up under the cannabinoids. I don't have that on the top of my head, nor do I have a copy of that. So I can't say specifically which of the esoterics, if you will, that would be included in that testing.
And then there's also THC delta 9, and it is legal in Tennessee as long as it's less than 0.03%. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, no, sir.
There's also just regular CBD that doesn't have any THC. Are you familiar with CBD?
I am familiar that it exists, yes, sir.
And wouldn't that have, even the ELISA test, would that have picked up on it?
Again, I would have to review what the ELISA test will pick up on. There are probably a few dozen different compounds under most of these categories. Because again, what we're seeing on the ELISA test is general families of drugs. And within each of these families, there are going to be numerous metabolites, variants on the theme, and more unusual compounds. So to answer your question, I can't tell you whether what Jasmine Pace, what was on that receipt. I can't tell you what was in it and how much was in it, and whether it would have shown up on any of the NMS testing.
Thank you. Doctor, just one moment. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions.
Does the jury have any questions for Dr. Cogswell? Cogswell, the jury has some questions for you. So I'll ask them, but if you can face the jury when answering, please. CSU used Blue Star agent that revealed blood in other locations of the apartment. Based on your autopsy, can you say that the victim's injuries may have occurred in more than just a single bedroom?
Yes, they could have. Again, I think the most likely is that the injuries were inflicted in the area in which, or in the position in which she was found. That does not preclude some of those injuries being inflicted elsewhere in the apartment, or that when her body was being moved, that some blood leaked out and was found elsewhere in the apartment.
Are you able to identify any of the wounds were cleaned with peroxide or alcohol?
No, I'm not.
Were Jasmine Pace's pants tested for anyone else's DNA or fingerprints, if you know?
I do not know.
Would you be able to identify if carpet fibers were found in any of the wounds inflicted on the body or anywhere on the body?
I found no carpet fibers in the wounds themselves. Some hairs were recovered off of her clothing and her body. Those were all submitted to Chattanooga PD. As to what the test results showed, I don't know.
Did you examine Jasmine Pace's body for someone else's, in this case, Jason Chen's fingerprints and DNA? I'm gonna read this the way I think it was meant to be asked. Did you swab the victim's body or examine it in any way for anyone's fingerprints or DNA?
No, in her case, fingerprints would not be something that we could retrieve because the body is wet. For the same reason, swabbing for DNA is not going to really be terribly helpful because, again, she's wet, she's covered in a film of blood. So the question becomes, where do you swab? And it could be anywhere. So to answer that question, no.
Was the blade able to be examined for fingerprints after being removed from the body?
The portion of the blade was submitted to Chattanooga PD, and as to what testing was done, I do not know.
If no other knife was used, is it safe to say that the final wound was when the blade broke off in the lung?
Not necessarily. You would think so, but again, because most stab wounds are not straight in and out using the point of the blade, but are delivered on an arc, the snapped off portion of the blade, or the remaining portion of the blade, still has a sharp point right at the bottom edge, and that can start the knife into the body. It's not as efficient as an intact knife, but certainly some of the injuries particularly those that are simply incised wounds, for example, on the back of the head and on the shoulder, that complex incised wound. Those could certainly be done with that knife without the tip of the blade still on it.
Does it appear that all the wounds were inflicted by the same knife?
It is certainly likely, but it is not impossible that a second knife was used. However, the dimensions of the wounds don't say categorically this is two knives. So there's going to have to be some overlap. For example, a significantly smaller knife, like a pocket knife, would not be involved in this.
This is similar to a question that was already asked, but just different enough to be distinct. Was the wound that left the end of the knife in the body an ante or peri-mortem wound?
That was an ante-mortem wound. There's significant bleeding associated with that wound, not only in the skin, but also down in the muscle, as well as in the lung.
Approximately how many of the 60 wounds were definitely ante-mortem or definitely peri-mortem? You may exclude those that are neither.
Since it's a continuum and there's no sharp cutoffs, they can be only generally put into categories of ante and peri-mortem. Of the 60 wounds, and there's going to be some overlap, approximately half are ante-mortem, tending into the peri-mortem wounds. There's a few at either end that I can be definitive about, but the majority of them sort of blend together, and the middle area is kind of fuzzy. So the safest thing to say is approximately half of them are certainly ante-mortem, but some of those toward the tail end are getting into or close to the peri-mortem category.
There were a number of questions asked about self-defense. That's beyond this witness's scope of expertise, so those won't be asked. Was the giant perforating neck wound pointing up or down?
That was the edge of the blade was downward, and the general pathway of the blade was obviously from right to left, somewhat downward and a little bit forward.
What percent of the wounds are superficial, shallow, or deep?
That's approximately 10% of the wounds are going to be superficial. Another 10% or so, maybe 20% would be shallow. It depends on how you define shallow. And certainly some of the incised wounds are going to fall into that category. In fact, virtually all of them would be shallow. The rest of them would be deep wounds. So even saying there's some overlap, certainly at least half to 60% are deep wounds. And the remainder would be shallow wounds with a few superficial ones in there as a very low percentage.
How many of the wounds are pointing down?
The majority of, virtually all of them go from right to left. Most of them have a slight downward trajectory. Some of them have a little bit of an upward trajectory. The majority, however, are going to be pointing downward and into the body. The ones on the front will be going toward the back. The ones on the back will be going toward the front. So they're going to be going toward the core of the body. But the majority are going to be pointing downward as opposed to upward. Although we did talk about a few that had an upward pathway, particularly one in the back of the arm that went up into the axillary area.
Where were the most ante-mortem, i.e. first and earliest, wounds inflicted?
It's approximately an equal distribution. There's obviously a lot of head wounds and there's fewer wounds to the torso and the shoulder. But if we take percentages, there's approximately an equal percentage of head wounds and torso wounds that are going to be the antemortem wounds. But because the head has more wounds, head and neck, then that's going to have a greater number of wounds.
I think you just answered this one, just further clarify, where were the most perimortem, i.e. last wounds inflicted?
The most, just by number, the most perimortem wounds are going to be in the head area simply because there's more wounds there. For example, the one on the left eyebrow that actually went through the eyeball itself, and the one on the chin is getting close to perimortem wounds. But again, based on percentage distribution, it's fairly evenly spread throughout that whole cluster. I may add in there that the left-hand wounds tend to be a little bit more in the perimortem realm than in the antemortem realm. We sort of didn't discuss those yet.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that this victim was strangled?
That's a difficult question to answer, and the answer
Well,
to that...
let me stop you right there, Doctor. If it's something where you don't feel, nobody wants you to speculate. You certainly are an expert with a vast background, great relevant experience, but truly, if you think you're speculating, I prefer you not answer that question. If you think you can answer it to some reasonable degree of medical certainty, please answer it.
I would say this, rather than saying, I don't know, I have external injuries, that is the abrasion contusion, that can be consistent with strangulation. I don't have internal injuries that are consistent with strangulation, but I also have an overlay of sharp force injuries. So you've heard me talk at length, till you're probably sick of it, about all of these injuries. And the simple thing is, it is possible, but I can't go farther than it is possible.
This may be a similar question. Is it likely that some of the wounds were inflicted while the victim was not in the fetal position, even though at least most of the wounds were inflicted while the victim was in the fetal position?
It's certainly possible. As to the likelihood, I would put that as fairly low. Again, because of the clustering nature of all of these wounds, and also because the positioning of the body as found in that fetal position allows all of those wounds to be inflicted without requiring any movement on her part. So could some of them have been elsewhere? Yes, absolutely, as long as they are in that area. And then an overlay of other wounds once in that fetal position.
I believe you asked this or answered this already to in a different worded question, but I'll ask this particular version. Would the wound where the knife tip broke off in the lung be considered the last stab wound?
Again, it doesn't have to be. And she certainly could have received multiple other wounds simply with the broken end of the knife, because again, the knife is usually going to be coming in at an angle. So you do have a point, just a 90-degree point, as opposed to that 30-degree point.
Was the victim, if you know, was the victim's shirt ever found and collected?
I do not know.
Does amount of blood collected impact percentages that could result in testing? I.e., very small amount collected, would more blood confirm more accurate results?
No, the amount of blood collected is sufficient to run the test. If it's an insufficient quantity, then the toxicology lab will tell us not sufficient to run the test. We suggest doing targeted testing or this. They actually don't need anywhere near the amount of blood we give them. they can actually make do with 2 milliliters of blood. We usually send a 10 milliliter tube, but as you saw in this particular case, it was just under 6 milliliters. So there was plenty of blood. More blood would not actually have changed the results at all.
Okay, thank you. Can you redirect based on what the jury asked?
Yes, Your Honor, those raise my questions. Doctor, you're asked some questions by the jury regarding injuries caused by the knife after it was broken off in Jasmine Pace's lung.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to draw your attention specifically, sir, to some of the injuries to Jasmine Pace's head and face. And I'm going to start with what you described in your autopsy report as a 3/8 inch stab wound. Oh, wait. Can we have the... Sorry. 3/8 inch stab wound in the chin. We see this here. Does that injury appear to have been inflicted with the knife blade, the tip, still intact?
It could be. Again, the knife, after it's actually broken off, still has a point, but it's a 90-degree point. And since you have the curved surface of the chin, if you have a 90-degree corner meeting a curved surface, you can actually create that wound very easily. It would be basically the same as the corner of this paper coming onto a curved surface, and you can easily see how that would actually stab into the curved surface. So yes, this could be one of the wounds inflicted after the point is broken off.
Are there any of the injuries to Jasmine Pace that you can definitively say is prior to the knife being broken, other than the wound which resulted in the knife blade breaking off?
Again, since I don't know the length of the blade, the wound through the throat that actually perforates is unlikely to be with a broken knife. I would say that blade was intact at that time, simply because of the length and also because it's going through multiple different structures and it is going deeply. So if you have a blunt face there, even though the bottom edge is sharp, it's going to be a lot harder to push all the way through the neck and the skin to come out on the other side. Similarly, the wounds in the axilla and the back of the arm, these are...
Explain that, Judge. I'm sorry, Dr. Constable.
Certainly, if you've got it readily available. And the wound that's close to the complex wound that actually has the broken knife blade, if we look, this one is almost certainly with an intact knife. This one obviously has the broken blade in it. This one is going to require an intact knife because of the depth and the fact that it's actually getting through bone. Now, going through bone may actually have cracked the blade or whatever caused the very tip of the knife blade to break off may have cracked the blade and made it weaker and more prone to breakage. We're just going through the ribs. These stab wounds are almost certainly with an intact blade, as is this one, because of the depth that they're going. This wound also is going to be with an intact blade because it goes all the way into the mouth, through the neck and the base of the tongue. Wounds up here, while they're stab wounds, they don't go very deep. They stop at the skull. So the depth on these wounds is going to be on the order of a ½ inch or so, perhaps a little bit deeper. As far as the hand goes, This is a complex wound, and it can be done with a broken knife tip, but this one that goes all the way through the hand is not going to be. So with the two of them, they're very close together. They're likely to be inflicted in close temporal proximity, that is, close in time. So this one is likely not going to be from the broken knife. And certainly the ones that penetrate through the palm and through the finger are going to require a tip being on that blade. This one is basically an incised stab wound, and mostly incised, so it could be done with the broken blade. Some of these other ones, you can see how small they are, and they're on a relatively flat surface. So if you only have that 90-degree corner, you're not going to be able to make a wound that long without going deeper than these wounds are. So those are going to be with the knife intact.
Dr. Cogswell, by its very nature, does the fetal position that one of the jurors asked you about require an orientation to a surface?
Yes, you cannot achieve a fetal position stand-legged squat, but a fetal position, when that term is used, it would mean someone is lying down. And it may be on a bed, it may be on a floor, but curling up into that position doesn't necessarily require it, but it's very difficult to achieve it without lying down.
You mentioned squatting fetal position.
Well, a squatting position, if you're able to squat flat-footed, which I am not, but some people can actually squat flat-footed, and if they were to bring their arms together, functionally you've got basically a fetal position. If you tip them over on their side, it would not look materially different than Jasmine Pace's position.
So either balled up on your side or balled up on your feet.
Right. Or, let me expand on that, or you could be balled up on your back. If you're lying on your back and you pull your legs up, if you can get them up that high and cross your legs, you can do that. We all did that as kids and rock back and forth on our backs. So that would also be a possible fetal position.
Can we rule out any of those three fetal positions based upon the injuries that we see on the screen?
Well, since we don't have injuries in the front of the torso, we know that the front of the torso is protected, and that's legs and arms doing that. We only have, again, as you've heard so many times, that cluster of wounds on the right head, shoulder, upper back area. So if you can access those areas, you could be in any position as long as those areas are available to be stabbed. So if you lie on your side with your right side up, those areas are available to be stabbed. If you're able to balance on your feet while squatting and be stabbed 60-some times without falling over or spreading out your arms or in some way changing your position, that is also possible. Lying on your back, that's going to be very difficult because we have wounds in the back. So the overwhelming likelihood is that she's lying on her side.
So it's the stabs in the back that can eliminate the back position?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Doctor, you cannot say definitively Jasmine Pace was stabbed with a broken blade?
I cannot. It's certainly possible, but I can't say definitively that she was.
What was it? Anything's possible? What was your line?
All things are possible that do not violate the laws of physics.
And you cannot say definitively in what room of the apartment Jasmine Pace had, in what room she died.
That is also correct.
Thank you, Doctor.
further questions based on what the statement?
Thank you, Dr. Cockrell. Proceed again.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones, pardon,
The state recalls Kristen Schubert.
Question on what